In this video, I want to show you the most common type of variable in C# strings. Go ahead and start your Visual C# 2010 Express, which you installed in the first section. Click on New Project. Type a name of a project, for instance, Test Strings, and you'll be in business with a new console application. So, how do you define a string? Type string name equals Jim, and there you have it. The variable name contains the data Jim. If you want to display that, CW tab for console write line name, and if you click here, you'll see it really quickly. So that's why you always want to do a read line here and run again. And here you see that the contents of the string is Jim. Quite straightforward. Let me show you some of the peculiarities of the C# language when defining strings. As with most other languages, you can define a string as a null. So I could say that, let's just say name equals null. Not here, but here. So that when we display it, we will see nothing, because it is not defined. We can also define it as empty. And when we display it, we see nothing again. But it's important to note that a value of null is different than a value of empty. Null means that the value is not defined. Empty means that the value is defined and it's empty. Another way to define a string as empty is to say string empty, which you'll see a lot in programs. And this will display also emptiness. So one aspect of defining strings that will surprise you at the beginning is if you do this, for instance, string path equals C# / test, and you display it, and you run it like this, and you get C:, this is a tab, EST. Why is that a tab? Because /t means tab. Anything following a slash, which is an escape character, has a special meaning. For instance, /t is tab, /n is new line. In order to get the /t that you want, put in 2 backslashes. Sorry, that's not a slash, it's a backslash. So if you run this, you will actually get the backslash that you wanted. If you have a number of these, assets, name, then you have to put in 2 backslashes for each, and you see that they are converted to single backslashes. There's an easier way to do this, of course. String path 2 equals @, and that means to literally interpret all of the backslashes. So you have C:, /test, assets, name. And now we'll display path 2. And you see that they are actual single backslashes, as we wanted. So there are times when you want to put in tabs. For instance, you might say string message equals tab 1, tab 2, tab 3. For instance, let's display this. And we see that they are actually tabbed out like that. As I mentioned earlier, you can also have, or another escape character is n, for instance. So if you have the same thing here with new lines, then it will display thusly 1, 2, 3. This at the beginning. So this is also very common to put in new lines into your strings. However, if you're copying in code, for instance, or something from a text file, and you have, say, 20 or 30 new lines, you probably don't want to use these new line characters. You can also define a string like this, message 3 equals, and then 1. Excuse me, you have to put the @ here, just as we did here for the interpreting the backslashes literally. 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, and then end the string there. And Visual Studio interprets the variable to be all on one line with these literal new lines as new lines in the variable, which is very helpful if you're copying in code, for instance, or some type of text. Another tricky instance with strings is quotation marks, so that if you have a message 4, this is a new report, of course, is not going to work because this character is defining the string itself. So you just want to put backslashes before the quotes and, oh, I'm sorry, before I displayed message 2, this is message 3. Let me show you that it actually worked. Yes, it worked. And now message 4. This is a new report, and you see that the quotation marks are around new. Another little tricky issue to note is if you have quotation marks in a literal string like this, let's say we have message 5, and you want to say this is a new report on one of these lines, it's not going to work, strangely enough. We're getting errors here. What you want to do then is a double quotation mark like this. And then you'll get message 5, what you want there. So you can also concatenate strings. For instance, you can say string first name equals Jim, string last name equals Smith, string full name equals first name plus space plus last name. If you're coming from PHP, these would be periods. In C#, they're pluses. If we display full name, we get what we would expect, Jim space Smith. But there's one lesson to learn when adding strings together or concatenating strings together like this right from the beginning when you're using C#, and that is that if you add strings together like this, since each time you add a string to a string, you actually create a new string. If you're doing this hundreds or thousands of times in a loop, then you want to use StringBuilder instead. Let me quickly show you that. For instance, let's do it the wrong way first. Let's say we have a number list that we want to define. We'll go through the numbers. What I just did there was FOR tab to give me a for next loop. I equals 0 to 100, for instance, and inside the for loop, we will have number list being added to, so number list plus equals, which means to add to it, I, which at the beginning is 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3. We'll convert this to a string, add a comma, and then output it. So CW tab number list plus, let's say, go. We don't need that one anymore, and let's run it. So we see that we have counted from 0 to 99, and then we said go. What happened behind the scenes here is that each time number list was added to, each time we added this or these strings here to this string, it got created again. That's what's going on behind the scenes. So just remember, if you're doing this kind of concatenation in a loop, the rule is more than 4 times, then you want to use StringBuilder. And here's the syntax for using StringBuilder. Let me comment all of this out. I'm doing Control-K-C to comment this. And I make a string builder, SB equals new string builder. I do a for loop again from I to 100, just as I did above. Now, instead of adding to a string, I'm going to append to the string builder, SB append. And the same thing that we added before, to string plus this. And then afterwards, CW tab, SB to string, all of that has been concatenated or appended. And then we'll add this go at the end. And if we run it, we have the exact same thing. But behind the scenes, it was much more efficient because we created one object here, a string builder, and appended to it, which didn't create a new object every time we concatenated a string. So now you know the basics of strings in C#. Just remember that if you concatenate more than 4 times, for instance in a for loop like this, then you want to use StringBuilder instead of strings.